add in the distributive property of fuzzy?
We lost your fuzzy top.
Yes.
I'll just make sure not to whistle into it.
Oh well. It'll uncover itself.
Hi, Tanya.
Okay, I'm gonna get us started.
Let's pass out the treaty stuff now. Yeah, you start it, and then we can pass them out. Yeah, because I do want people to see it. So,
No, it's before your introduction.
well, as it, is that too distracting? Tell me. Okay, then wait. Okay. I will follow you.
Yep. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Hello. Welcome to Burlington Lutheran. And I've got some crazy feedback here because it's my phone. Can I give this to somebody? I'm going to have Mark take it to the back. Thank you. Thank you. So tonight we get to, I still got feedback. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Laura will sound better. We will make sure it sounds better when you're on. My name is Sheris. I'm the pastor here at Burlington Lutheran, and we are very grateful to be able to hear from ʷalʔalq today about resilience in Native American communities through the lens of treaties, and specifically the Treaty of ʷalʔalq. And we do have a printed copy of that treaty for everyone, and we'll pass that out as soon as we get to that point in our time tonight. But Laura, thank you very much.
All of these technical things. Thank you. So it's ʷalʔalq ʷalʔalq Skagit. So I am Lora Pennington, and I'm an elder from the Upper Skagit tribe. And one of the things that I love about my own upbringing is that I didn't have a lot of these tools growing up. I grew up in Seattle, and it was only in my 20s when I met my grandma Vi. She was my instructor at the University of Washington, my first day of college. I did not know her. I didn't know any of this. And yet she and my other mother, Roberta Wilson, ʷalʔalq, as in wounded knee, Wilson's both times. So I had these two powerhouse women come into my life just at the right time. And I was a punk. I had shaved white walls, all sorts of things. And instead, these two ladies looked at me and said, I'm keeping this one. Tucked me in a pocket, and I had no clue my entire world was going to change. And everything that I knew that I could never handle, knew that it was bigger than me, knew this was going to kill me, turned out to be things that these ladies and the rest of my community simply said, no. We're getting through this, and I love this. The idea from my childhood is I'm getting through this, and I'm going to take with me. Well, when I got into college and met these ladies, I found out not only am I taking one person with me, is that I'm going to enter into my tribal community, and we're all going to get through this. We're all going to reach out to each other. One of the things I love about the learning about this is, for me, Treaty Day is the ideal example of resilience. As Native Americans here in the Puget Sound, we get together and we celebrate our treaties. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the boring history. We're going to try and get through it. But why would Native American people ever celebrate their treaties? Well, I'll tell you why not first, and then we'll get into why. So we'll go on to our next slide. This is so crazy to be able to just see it up there. So we need to talk about what is a treaty. People don't understand this. No matter how many times I talk about it, I have people coming back to me later. Here in the United States, our Native American treaties are basically real estate contracts. They are the law of this land. They're in the Constitution both times, the original Constitution and the one we are under now. And treaties can only be negotiated between two equal political bodies. So that means countries can negotiate treaties with countries, states with states. Florida cannot go off and negotiate a treaty with Switzerland. It just can't. And we all know, oh, Florida, what are you doing this time? But they still can't do it, okay? And the other misconception we have about treaties is when they started being negotiated. And the first treaty in the Americas, the first written one, was between the British and the indigenous people here. There were mild treaties with Spain, but they were not with the United States. They were negotiated by far earlier than that. In fact, one of the most famous was negotiated for the British by William Penn. Yes, of Pennsylvania. He negotiated one of the earliest treaties. And people don't recognize that. So I don't know where my non-echo spot is. I'm trying to find it. I keep getting further and further away from my notes because I notice the further I get back here, the more echo. Okay, so, but William Penn negotiated a treaty, and we all know that there were the 5 civilized tribes. They had negotiated with Britain. And those treaties are actually part of but first, so those are the first ones with Europeans. But the first ones that were actually negotiated here were between tribal bodies, huge ones. You know? So we know there were amazing treaties to negotiate commerce, negotiate land settlements, to negotiate peace. All of those were done between tribal entities. We had vast trade networks, and those were all about agreements, okay? And we're two of them forward. Sorry. Okay. So the first treaty-making era was between native individuals, indigenous peoples. Okay. And I've done that one too. We're on the next one. Cheers. Yeah, I just talked through that one. Okay. And we're into the. Oh, you're right. We weren't. The second treaty-making era is where I'm at. Okay. So the first treaty-making era was between the Native Americans. The second treaty was between indigenous populations and Europe, and they were the exact same things. They were peace treaties, just like the peace treaties that everybody else negotiated. It was for land, skirmishes, for trade, for the exchange of slaves. Those were in those early treaties also. Okay, and then we go to the there it is, 1600s with William Penn, and then by the 1700s, whether by the 1700s, whether they were honest treaties negotiated in good faith, or whether or not they were just ruses, just simply to grab whatever they can, resources, land, whatever. But what happened was an interesting thing. King George of England actually stopped westward expansion. So all of these treaties have been negotiated with the native people, and yet those treaties, when they were broken by the British, the tribes were going back into British courts and actually winning on that the British had not come forward on points of the treaty process. So those treaties that were negotiated with the British were broken. The tribal people went back into British courts and won. And that caused huge problems for the colonists and also for Britain. What are they going to do now that these treaties that they signed, even in bad faith, were being applied unevenly? If they were applied, then they could easily just weasel out of them. All of these treaties with the British, they were failing, and yet the tribal people were winning in British courts. So when King George stopped westward expansions, that's actually one of the reasons for the Revolutionary War. Not just taxation without representation, but the fact that King George said, we have to figure this out. Stop westward expansion, stop this process until we actually can put a line under this and figure out what we're going to do. And then we, as the Americans to be, said no way. We were going to expand into the West no matter what. And that's the causes of the Revolutionary War, okay? And so finally, we have the Revolutionary War. We move into our first entity, which is the first 8 years of being a country. And that first government didn't work out. So 1789, we get a new government, new constitution, and with it, very specific ideas about what treaties are and what's going to happen to us native people, and it was not good. We are called savages and awful and ugly throughout the founding documents, even though those founding documents were based on some of our previous agreements and negotiations. And it was quite an interesting, legally, such a huge and crazy overturning of things from the British. Now we're into the Americans, and yet still negotiating treaties, and they're still just as bad. That treaty making, the third treaty making era, was from 1774 to 1832. And it said things like, if you were non-native, once these treaties were negotiated, where the land treaties were negotiated, you needed a passport to cross our land. We were literally separate countries within what became the United States, and you needed a passport to travel over our land. Well, and that makes a really interesting process, how it is that we go from countries negotiating with other countries to you need a passport to cross our area, just like if we were going to European countries. And then now, the next treaty-making era was very, very interesting, okay? From 1732, the next one, until 1871, now we get into the absolute dishonest treaty-making. The only thing that this was a land grab. And starting from the East Coast, trying to get the least amount of things that you had to negotiate with, and yet still be able to get the land, okay? But we'll talk about that because it doesn't carry on the way the U.S. wants it to, okay? And by 1832, it changes into the point where we are no longer countries, but we are now domestic dependent. What is this? The one before, domestic dependent nations. And there's several words for that. So we go from individual countries to now we're separate we're dependent, an internal dependent nation. Okay. And this is all done through the courts, without any reason at all. None of this would stand up in court if we had taken it to any other country. Just literally just checking a box, and now we're no longer nations. We're dependent. You know, we're no longer our separate countries. We're dependent entities. And the end of the treaty-making process came just as quickly. So 1871, the US government, well, actually the House of Representatives, on a financial bill, added a rider onto it that ended the treaty-making process. And you know how it is, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Senate is the one that does the policy. The House of Representatives is the one that does the money. So this means that the money end of our government wrote a policy, attached it onto a financial bill, and sent it over to the policy side. Well, the Senate should have gone, you have no right. We're the one that make policy. You do the money. That's what should have happened. And it didn't. In fact, the Senate went, all right, click. They passed it. And then, so with our checks and balances, when it went up to the president to get signed, the president said, no. This can't start in the House of Money. It has to start in the House of Policy. And yet, it was just the opposite, and all they did was rubber stamp it because they realized by 1870s that these treaties were actually in our favor in ways that they never meant for it to be. And these treaties were not, I'm going to make a treaty specifically with my cousin's called ʷalʔalq, and I know that she likes cereal, so we'll have a cereal article. You know, and then I'm going to negotiate a separate treaty with my cousin Carla Jean, and we know that she's going to like tea, and so we'll have a separate article for tea in her treaty. Nope. That is not how these treaties were. They're basically carbon copy, starting on the East Coast, and it didn't matter if you were from Florida to Washington, from Maine to California. So many of the same provisions are in there, and the terminology is all the same. Doesn't matter whether you are Florida with their beautiful rickrack skirts, Midwest with its ribbon skirts, or here with our, well, this is polyester, but our wool skirts, okay? Didn't matter. It was all the same. These were literally off of a template back east, and then just out here, and it didn't matter. But, and so this financial bill ended the treaty-making process, 1871. What happened to the states that came into existence after 1871? Without treaties, anybody that became a state after 1871 was no longer an Indian, was not an Indian. In order to be an Indian in this country, your tribe has to have a government-to-government agreement with the United States government. So literally, there are no more Indians after 1871. Yeah, but my family, we were not born Indian. Upper Skagit did not exist as a political entity with a government-to-government relationship with the United States. So the three of us, we were born just wild, not wild Indians. But it becomes a very interesting thing. So people, well, I won't get sidetracked on that. So I now have a schedule, so I won't get sidetracked. As you see, it's one of those things that, okay, yes, I'm not talking about that yet. So, 1871, and I love that. I said in an unheard of policy move, and it's true. That was the first time a political policy was negotiated by the House of Money instead of in the House of Policy, Senate and the House of Representatives. So crazy. So as these basically stamped out treaties are going across the country, the same terms are in the same treaties. So although there was, you start with the East Coast tribal entities and then you go through the plains, none of them had whales. When you get to Washington State, there are treaties here that have whaling provisions. But all of these just photocopies from the East Coast, they had to start doing things different. And it is very interesting to see how it started off from the East Coast, and as these treaties are negotiated, how they had to figure out what to say, okay? And what it meant, and how these new people just need to, these new tribal people just need to buck it up and do exactly like they did on the East Coast, because that's what we want. That's how the negotiations went, okay? And so we come here, we finally get to here, and the treaty that we are all represented by is the Treaty of Point Elliott, negotiated on January 22nd, 1855. And I love researching this time period. I love this time period because Governor Stevens comes here. He is the provisional governor of the territory, and then he becomes, and when you read his correspondence about the treaty-making process here in Washington, his correspondence back to his bosses go from, the shiny penny, I'm gonna do this, I know what I'm doing, I know this, to, you can practically hear him sniveling. I'm supposed to make one treaty for everybody in Washington territory, and they just won't play along. They want to do things their way. And so you could hear him sniveling. And really, by this point, once you got to this coast, it was take the land, give them practically nothing. And that's all we want to do. And I love reading the extinguish their land holdings, extinguish it. So, and it's an interesting watching or reading about the treaty processes here in Washington State. It's so fascinating because if you open up any of our history books, it says this: Isaac Stevens sat down with his translators. All of the tribal chiefs and sub-chiefs came, and they camped at ʷalʔalq and then agreed to sign the treaty. And it was really interesting. It says, yes, the treaty was negotiated in the Chinook ʷalʔalq, not the Chinook language, Chinook ʷalʔalq, which is a trade jargon. And if you know the difference between a jargon and a language has grammar, it has nouns, it's all from the same thing. There's a basic cohesive, we all agree these words mean this. Well, a jargon, including the Chinook ʷalʔalq, had about the same amount of words as like a 3-year-old child. It was made up of several languages, including French, English, and a couple of tribal ones, and then some of our original trade jargons. And that's what was used, the Chinook ʷalʔalq was used to describe those legal, the document that you have, all of those very formal, very legal, very high test. You got to know your legalese to understand it. It was negotiated in a dialect that had fewer words than a 3-year-old child has. And it was to explain some pretty amazing things. If you look at Article 1 that whole paragraph, along with Articles 2 and 3, is all about this is the land you're going to give up. And we're just going to describe it only in our terms, not yours. And by the way, we've decided who you are too. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we didn't have chiefs. We didn't have sub-chiefs. We didn't have hereditary chiefs. We certainly didn't have Indian princesses. None of those are ours. We have basically offices. Our leaders are the office. So if you were a great war general, that's the name you got. Do you see? If you were a healer and that was your job, you would get a personal name that involved your healing powers. Mine, ʷalʔalq, means that it actually translates to something close to I have the right to tease Terry anytime I want to. Right? Yeah. I think that's really close to the definition. I mean, I've heard words about it in that, okay? So we don't have the stands with the fist names. We basically have, I do this kind of work for my community. And that name came from my great who did this kind of work for my community. And if I grew up and changed jobs, I'd get another name. I'd keep my first name, and then I would just get another one to do the next bit of work. So as we are negotiating this with the chiefs and sub-chiefs and with the translators in the Chinook ʷalʔalq into our basic dialects, all of these things were described in the words of a 3-year-old. Okay? And I love this. The said tribes and bands of Indians hereby cede, relinquish, and convey to the United States all of their right, title, and interest in and to the lands and country occupied by them, bound to describe da, 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 da. Imagine a 3-year-old saying all of that. Let's go on to Article 4. This is what we agreed to do. We agreed that to remove and settle upon the aforementioned reservations within a year. And within a year of the ratification of the treaty, okay? And, but again, this doesn't make sense in a trade jargon. It doesn't make sense to a 3-year-old. And what did it mean in Lushootseed? Okay? Or the various dialects of Lushootseed. Because remember, it covers Swinomish, Samish, Skagit, all over from Seattle all the way up to here, the Stillaguamish. So all of us, with our individual dialects, had to translate from Chinook ʷalʔalq into our dialects. Okay. And every time, from the first time in my 20s that I read the treaty to now, every time I am just mystified how this was a just process and how we handled it, okay? And I included Article 5 because it has our fishing and gathering stuff, okay? So I described to you basically the history from the American government's perspective. And we just had to do that because let me tell you how it is from our perspective. And this is where we get to the resilience, okay? From the beginning, we understood these humans that were coming into our area. And we wanted to have what we had, which is a relatively peaceful life. Everybody understood where they were going to be, even when you had difficulties with people, you knew what was going to happen because we understand we had advanced negotiating skills. And it was it was a very important part of our communities. Well, another thing that was a very important part of, we're on the next part, how the treaties processes for us. We're on the next slide. The one before that. There we go. One of the main differences in this negotiation is that in our communities, we're exogamous. We all know what that means. When you have these state marriages between the different tribal entities, and these were negotiated, but women had the right. We were the ones that said, I'm going to go or I'm not going to go. And because of that, the women went to live, once they married, lived with the husband's family. And we brought all the languages we knew from our community. And when we moved up there, we learned all of the language that they knew. So when these treaty negotiations happened, who were the translators? The women. So this nice little thing with that the American history books tell us that all the men just sat down and worked this out. No. There were vast family groups that came to these treaty negotiations. And as the women were there, probably doing handwork because they were bored, because that's how I do things. Okay, maybe they weren't, but that's what I would do. The women were doing the translating. And remember, since the women knew all the languages from there and the other ones, they could hear what everybody else was saying. Okay? So first off, women were the translators. Second off, from our huge indigenous trade networks, we knew that this process was rigged. We had heard what had happened on the East Coast and all through the Midwest. And so we came into this, and I love this, knowing that we were going to have to give up land, but we're going to get every single provision that we possibly can. So they went in with the idea of, we'll give them nothing. And we went into the idea of, we're going to retain every single thing that we can possibly do. That's our tactic going into the treaty negotiations. So instead of these little babes in the woods, we came in with concepts. We knew what was going to happen. Then, in addition to that, there were many, many people within the various communities who didn't want to sign the treaties, who wanted to go to war. We knew this is it. This is the end of this country. We need to, and so some of the folks, if they couldn't get enough armies together, literally just went and hid in the hills. And one of the fascinating things that I got to do as a trainer here in Mount Vernon, we took teachers from the Mount Vernon public schools and the power company rented us a lodge, and we took those teachers, a couple of different rounds of them, up to Mount Baker Lodge, and we put them through this treaty making process. We literally got everybody together and said, okay, when you came in, you had to have your the values about yourself, 3 things. And then when you got together, you got to divide into these smaller groups with everybody here at this training. And then we had everybody sit together, and they determined the values for their tribe. And while they were doing that, and this was, the fun part, Mom and I, we did this with Mom and Grandma Vi and I and a flute player. So we told them stories, and we also put them through this terrible process. So as they were defining themselves as tribal people, we went around and killed people. We would either talk to them, or since my mom couldn't whisper, she would have a little piece of paper. You died. Quietly go to the corner and don't talk to anybody. So we have all of the dead tribal people go off into a corner, and then we put the remaining tribal people on another activity. We went over to the corner of our killed tribal people and said, you're the settlers. They don't know this, But you, as settlers, can go in that room and take anything you want from them, anything. And these are really nice people. These are public school teachers. So what you expect is them for like maybe chairs, tables, pens. Well, from the beginning of that particular cohort, there was 2 guys that were just like this. They came in, they sat together, you could see that they were work buddies. Well, you know what we did. We split them up. We split them up on purpose, okay? And it worked. We took what I considered was the quieter of the two, you know, and I killed him. And in telling him, you can take anything you want, he shocked me. He took his buddy's glasses. He knew his buddy was legally blind without glasses. Remember, these are nice school teachers from Mount Vernon. And Mom and I were like, whoa, what was that? You should see the nose. Oh my God, you know. And every day at the end of our training, we would have, you know, we'd just chat and see how everybody felt about this. You better believe nobody missed that. When we chatted about that, nobody missed that day. We were all like, okay, why'd you do that? Well, we said it nicely, but we all wanted to know. And he was awesome. He said, I never really understood drunk on power. But when you told me I could do anything, I could take anything, I could do anything, I realized I could. We've all seen those experiments from the 50s about the blue eyes and the brown eyes. Well, this is just another one of those. And it was so surprising. But we knew, as tribal people going into these negotiations, we understood this and we were ready. And the language is not what we would have wanted when we went to colleges and universities later. That is not how they described these articles at all. And I'm sorry I did not find it in time for this, but my grandma and I translated the treaty into ʷalʔalq. If I find a copy, I will get it. I know I have a copy, but my mom's dementia, her reorganization of some things. My kindergarten papers I found in several different places, but I haven't, that folder is empty. It's on my computer file somewhere, so, okay? So that's how the treaty process was to us, okay? Very different than what we learned. Very different than what we talk about, okay? And this section was really interesting, the changes to our lives after the treaties. So we did the best we could. We went in knowing that this was a bad faith. Some of our people did want it, just didn't want to go to war. Some people wanted it. But here's the changes to our lives after the treaties. We had to abandon our family homes where we had been for thousands of years. We were to move onto the reservations, and you saw in the article where it says a year after ratification. Absolutely not. As soon as the treaties were signed, they were shoving us onto reservations. And it didn't matter what tribe you were literally just rounded up and put on a reservation. And so mothers could be in one tribe under this treaty. Their children could be down at ʷalʔalq under the other treaty, one of the other treaties. And it just happened to be, if you were there on the day that this happened, you were rounded up and that said, okay, now you're ʷalʔalq, which wasn't a tribe, by the way. ʷalʔalq was not a tribe. ʷalʔalq was a village, and it just became a tribe. Then if you look at it, it says the ʷalʔalq tribes, because it is, I could have been, we could all have been, but the rest of the family, we could all have enrolled ʷalʔalq. But we would take her in, yes, so, but, yeah, she's our baby, so yes. But all of us could have been to ʷalʔalq. Kay and Jay and I, we could all be Swinomish, easy. But, by the way, you can only change tribes once in your life, period, end of sentence. You must choose between your grandparents. You must. So, okay. And I think that's just awful. Continued the changes to our life. None of the provisions in the treaty that are outlined were honored by the U.S. government for 4 years. 4 years. We were shoved onto the reservations, not allowed to leave, and we're not provided with enough food, medical. If there was education, it was from there before. So like the Catholic, the church continued. But if your particular reservation didn't have it, you weren't given education. All of the things that were outlined in the treaties did not happen for 4 years. And frankly, any parent would not just stay on the reservation. You would go off. There was bountiful food from the minute you stepped off the reservation. Yeah, lots of people just left because they wanted to feed their kids. And if you stayed on the reservation, you were supposed to get this pie in the sky at some point, but you were not given enough food. Even Father Charus, one of the main a priest who did a lot with the language, he was even writing the federal government saying, people are starving, you have to do something. And of course the response, but well, when it gets ratified. So, okay. Oh, and further changes in our lives. They were allowed to take our children and put them in boarding schools. And it was horrible. One of my grandma-in-law, Grandma Denso, one of the most important things about our traditional religion is bathing. You bathe every day of the year, right out there, in the Skagit River. And she said that in boarding schools, some of her and some of her girlfriends wouldn't shower because that's where they'd get you. You were beaten if you spoke your language. You were beaten, or worse, if you practiced the traditional religion. And a lot of the kids would get together at night and just speak in the language. Others who got caught, one of our aunties, Grandma Vi Fernando, as we were trying to record and do our language stuff, she says, every time I come to one of your language events, I can taste the lye in my mouth. She was a child, and they would wash her mouth out with lye just for speaking our language. Okay. All of our religious gatherings, both traditional religion and any of the Christian religions, were outlawed. Even our meetings, you could not go see your family. If they were on a different res, you just didn't see them. And remember how we were just divided willy-nilly? So, he's okay. He's doing great. Yeah, he's so cute over there. So, with all of this, okay, right now, this is what we need to do. Everybody stand up, stretch, hug your neighbors, say hello, yeah, shake their hands, yeah, okay? All right. Stretch. We'll do some of these, okay. Because we've done the tough part. we've done the tough part. So this is our time to take care of ourselves, just a little bit, okay? Because we've done the tough part. With all of, and everybody look at the little dog in the back, because look at that. We need that. Do you see this? Little dog knows we need a breather, okay? We've been through the tough history part. Now we get to the resilience part. With all that I have told you, I am looking forward in this month to go to as many Treaty Day celebrations as I can. Is that crazy? Well, because our Treaty Day celebrations are awesome. There's lots of good food. All of your families from multiple different tribes, you get together. You hear some of the most beautiful, powerful songs. And you have speakers who tell you about the stuff that I'm talking to you about. My first Treaty Day was down at the big smokehouse down at ʷalʔalq. And so I'm a girl from a SeaTac area who met Grandma Vi at the UW. I don't know what I'm going to do at Treaty Day. Grandma Vi says, I think you'll like this. And so what do? I figure out how to get my tickets, because when Grandma Vi says, maybe you'll like this, it means you're going, and you're going to listen, and I'm going to ask you about it later, okay? So going from a punk with no boss, going to the UW, I get 2 bosses who set very high expectations for me and then love me up to them. Very different from Western education, completely different. I had no idea. I'm dyslexic as anything. I can't spell in any language. Sheris was going through my stuff. I was like, is it spelled right? But that is the part of the resilience we need. Do you see? Him. Okay? So, but why? Sorry, my first day, I'm going in there. It is so loud. Everybody's warming up separately, individually, over in the groups. It's loud. I sneak in. He's coming. Yeah. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Oh, we need him. And I slide in. What did you find? You did? Okay, good. You got it. Okay. Just hang with me. I like it. So, okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Anytime he needs to. I love him doing this, okay? So I think this is great. So I go in and I'm greeted at the door. What tribe are you? And by now I'm saying, Upper Skagit. I will never say I'm part of the SeaTac tribe. I'm a punk from the SeaTac tribe, ever again. So I go in there, I get to sit with my relatives. I don't know them, because remember, I grew up in Seattle. I'd come and visit up here. I know my grandpa and all my immediate family, but we didn't even know each other at this point. And I still got to tease Terry, though. So I knew I was going to meet him, so I was allowed to tease him. Anyway, but as I sat down, I'm just trying to get my bearings, listening to all of this amazing chaos, and a stair-step group of kids come in, from this, and it felt like there were 90, but there was probably like 6, maybe 5. They walk up, they climb the bleachers behind me, and they go to sleep in all of that noise and music and they just go, and I literally had that moment in my life I love this. These babies grow up in this so that all of this noise they can sleep in. I love that. Okay. So let's talk about the origin of Treaty Day, okay? Oh yeah, good. Do you want to talk about the origin? Yeah, you can have Do you want a piece of paper? There you go. Oh, good, good, good. Okay, so we leave the 1980s and we go back to Governor Stevens. So back in, about statehood, our gatherings are outlawed. Our family gatherings, churches, any of that stuff is just basically you stay on your reservations and you don't go anywhere else. And don't have any big meetings, okay? Well, our elders, we're not going to have this. We're not going to keep the families divided. And they called Governor Stevens and assembled a meeting, and Governor Stevens says, well, basically, show me what you got. If you can show me that there's anything to your gatherings and spiritual stuff, then we'll work something out. And so one of our relatives came forward and sang his beautiful song, and a cougar walked right into the gathering and right through. A cougar, the coolest stuff. And Governor Stevens was frightened. And then he said that, okay, you could have gatherings, but we need to approve them. And so we began gathering. Christmas, eventually Thanksgiving, Easter, 4th of July. That's why we sell fireworks. 4th of July. How could they fault us for celebrating their holidays? There's no fighting this. We're simply going to get our way. We're simply going to take care of each other. We're going to take care of laughter and joy and resilience. We're going to do our agenda, what we need to make ourselves whole. And so we celebrate Treaty Day. Isn't that amazing? All of this horror that started from the East Coast, where we were inhuman, we did not have souls, we didn't have any civilization. Tell that to the mound cultures of the Midwest. Have you heard about that? The Americas were supposed to not have any mega building because we were just, not civilized. We were basically hunter-gatherers. We didn't farm. Well, guess what? Not only did we farm, and they can show it based on our orchards, literally hazelnuts from out of this area grow here because we planted them. That's farming. And yet you still have people say, oh, you never farmed. Oh, really? And we can prove it over and over again. And then we never had any monumental building. Well, the mound cultures of the Midwest are tremendously huge, absolutely bigger than, and they are noticing now that they aligned with celestial events. So these happens just build a mound says, oh no, this is astronomy. This is agriculture, astronomy, politics, all the things that, guess what, humans do. And we could have buckled. They're literally taking our kids, okay? So let's rewind what I taught you earlier. The first treaties, remember, were between indigenous people. These were highly sophisticated. These lasted for ages. They lasted long after they lasted into modern times, some of these agreements. Modern times, as I was researching for my cousin Carla's tribe, I found out that my cousin Carla didn't like the Suquamish. Well, okay, her ancestors. Okay, but yeah, there was a failed treaty negotiation between the Stillaguamish and the Suquamish, and it literally made it into modern court documents. Isn't that cool? I mean, I'm sorry that it failed. I'm sorry, But this is still, as we were doing court cases in the 1950s, this failed agreement between these two tribes, pre-contact, was still affecting. Do you see? So these agreements that we made weren't simple little, yeah, you stay over there, I want to trade with you. These were huge, complex, and I love it. Okay, we got this. You want another piece of paper? Here, I'll give you one this way. How about this way now? Okay. Okay, so that's the first treaty making era, how sophisticated our initial treaties between indigenous groups. That's how sophisticated we're. So let's rewind to the second era, okay? This is the treaty making between Europeans and indigenous people, okay? These are also very important because they were the same treaties being negotiated between indigenous folks and the Europeans. These were the same treaties that were being negotiated between countries. They read very similar, and they caused problems in court. Remember? The British negotiated treaties and then did not, oh, don't worry, just come on up. Yeah, just come on up. See, but do you know what he's doing? He's teaching us resilience. Do you see this? He is joyfully going about his business as we're talking about some really tough stuff. No, I absolutely love his pardon. He's now my co-presenter, okay? So, but, yeah. And so, okay, and so it's the same. These were the same political organizations getting together and making agreements. This is not anything like our history classes taught us, is it? Not at all. And some of those still affect things that are going on between international, okay? And then the treaty-making era between us, natives, and us, the U.S., okay? The third era. One of the things that was very different about the third era is that we knew what was going to happen. Between our vast trade networks, we started planning. We knew they were going to come to our area. We knew what we wanted. And we went into this not understanding their language, not understanding their politics, but understanding our needs. What an important part of resilience. You need to know your needs. You need to know what you want. And you need to know going into situations, don't ask questions that you don't already know the answers to. If you don't know the answers, then just wait, okay? And I love this because those early treaties, specifically the Treaty of Point Elliott, affects international commerce to this day. When things came, when push came to shove, we knew that our treaties were not being honored, and so we started fishing in the 50s, as early as the 40s. We literally, these are rights that we held on to in our treaties. Nobody gave us rights. We said, in this mortgage contract called the Treaty of Point Elliott, you're going to get your piece of land and you will live on it as you want. But when it comes to our piece of land, things have not changed. We will fish, we will gather, we will take care of our families, we will be the regular political bodies that we have always been on this land for thousands of years. That's what it says in all of those articles. Even though all of it is written in complete legal gibberish. It basically comes down to, we're selling you that land. The way you're going to pay for your mortgage is we're going to reserve these things that we have always done. That's why we get a gamble. Have you ever thought about that? Why do we get a gamble? Because humans, since the dawn of time, have come up with games and have done gambling. And in our treaties, we said our lives aren't going to change. So we get to gamble. Okay? One of my nephews is in the process of going through his nephewing ceremony, and he's going to be doing some gambling games. And because I have copies of some of our traditional gambling games, and that's why we have casinos. Okay? Why can we sell fireworks? Remember, because we were celebrating the 4th of July, because that's the way we got to see Grandma and Grandpa, or your grandchildren, or whatever. Okay? And so this is what resilience looks like. It is seeing your families, it is stretching, it is growing, it is looking at other perspectives and understanding how you need to deal with this and what you're willing to and what you're not. It is taking care of all of yourself. You're not a body separated from your brain, separated from your soul. You are a complete whole individual. And to take care of yourself needs to be, sometimes you just need to stand up. Sometimes you just need to stretch. We're going to do another little one that I absolutely love, just a little exercise. So I want everybody to just get comfortable in your seat, find a way that you can close your eyes and relax, and you're going to take a little trip with me, okay? First off, as we're traveling, we're going to a nice late summer day on the Skagit, okay? It's hot, it is lovely, and you are in comfy river clothes, okay? In this hot day, as you step into the river, it's a little chilly at first, but you can feel it on your toes. Feel your toes cringing at first and then relaxing. And you're just going to slowly lay down on a nice gravel bed. It's so hot. It is terribly hot, but you're going to lay down on a nice gravel bed where the water will just gently flow across underneath you. And as you're doing that, you can feel the heat on the top and the chill on the bottom. And you just sit there for a minute and you let that wash through you, both hot and cold, just for a minute. And then when you're ready, you slowly sit up. If you need to, you can do a tummy roll, lay in the cold in front if you need to. But for the rest of it, you're going to slowly sit up. And then you're going to slowly stand up and just let the water run down you. And then go over to the bank where you have nice towels and you have some water or juice, and just sit there for a minute. This is part of our traditional religion, is going places and seeing things and being a part of things that are not here with us right now. In this little visualization, I took you forward in time to a nice warm day. So if you're stressing today, if you are overwhelmed today, you need to take time, even just this little visit. Every time I'm storytelling, I visit with my Grandma Vi. Every time I give talks like this, I'm visiting with my Grandpa Oki and the other fishermen who were jailed for doing what we reserved in the treaties. Every time I'm weaving, I take this time and I just reach to my cedar. Every time I am in traffic, I take a minute and I practice my Lashut seed. oh, you know, I make all of the sounds that are hard for your Western tongue as I'm using the finger of doom. It's all got all of the scars on it. So don't you do that. No. Yeah. Take those times within your day to do these things that my ancestors have done for thousands of years. Is understand that you are one thing, body, mind, soul, spirit, fingers of doom. No, look at the finger of doom, by the way. So it's still dooming itself. But take that time to be good to yourself. We have challenging times to go through. We have things that are going to try and divide us, things that are going to try and wear us down. And we're not going to do that. We're simply not going to do this. We're going to be about the love and the light and the connectedness and the togetherness and the things that are lovely and different and things that are lovely and so similar. And we're just going to do that during this challenging time. And we're not going to let it be anything different than us as the powerful humans that we are, creating love and distraction and togetherness. Do you see? That's how we challenge ourselves when we are at our most desperate. Okay? You know, some of these times are going to be really, really tough. And instead, we're just going to reach to each other. And you're going to get through it, and you're going to take one person with you. And you're going to get through it, and you're going to take one person with you. And if we all do that, for us in our traditional culture, is we lift each other up. Because if you're lifting yourself up, you most likely have your foot on somebody else's throat. If we lift each other up, then we're all going to get through this. That's what we need to focus on. The immense wealth we have as human beings that we can share with each other. Okay. So, and there is another slide, but I've covered it in general, so we don't need to do it. So I loved having this thing, but at the same time, I know I'm going to cover about 82 more things because there's just not enough. You know what else is cool? So I want you guys to know that I have faith in you. You can handle this. You're going to get through this time, and you're going to be better at the end of it. And just know that. And if we each have that feeling about each other, then we'll win. Okay? So I thank you for coming tonight, and I appreciate all of your hearts and love. So thank you guys so much. Good job. And I did want to say this. Part of these concepts are, I have a dear beloved counselor named Catherine Fentress, and so much of what I know and love is from her. And so I'm glad to pass this around. This is available on Amazon. And I didn't make a slide from this. But I will just, her name is Catherine Fentress. She is a PhD, but she's also a miracle worker. She is loving and kind and just what you want in a counselor. And she knew things were coming up, and so she wrote this, How to Survive the Paradigm Shift. That's coming. Yep, and it's a terrific book. And I love how the stuff from my culture, when I'm with her, the stuff from my culture fits exactly into what she does. And I love that, because we're, like I said, we are the same. In here, we're the same. All right. Thank you, guys. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.